Now here. All right, we are recording. Welcome to the Hottest Part of the Day podcast. Joined here by a couple legends in the hash game. I'm your host, Joey Berger, the Humboldt local, but I'm honored to welcome a couple good homies, Nick of Rakems and Simply Adam, a couple of the generals in the hash army joining us today. This is really fun because the way I've been doing this show the last couple of weeks is no plan, just kind of the night before I make a message on my Instagram saying, hey, I'm going to record this tomorrow. I'm going to send out the link. And then about half hour before the show, I remember that I was actually going to do this and I start sending that link out. And you never know who's going to jump on. So I'm super stoked you guys could join me, and we'll see who else jumps on in the next bit or two. We're just going to avoid the heat for the day and have a little smoke and catch up with the homies. It's the hottest part of the day here in Middletown right now. It's 1 o'clock. It's only 84 right now. We're having a high of 87, but these are the coolest days we've had in about a month. So I had a nice productive morning, avoiding a couple hours of it this afternoon. Nick, where are you today? You look like you're in a nice, cool room, probably temperature controlled. What's going on with you today?
Yeah, we're in a chilly 65, 70 degrees right now in the lab out in Grass Valley Gold Country. Just trying to beat the heat. It's not too bad out here. Like you said, it's been triple digits practically for the past month. I feel for all the fire victims out there right now. My heart goes out to them and trying to salvage whatever they've lost, especially in the park fire. We've had a lot of people in the community that have lost everything real recently. So yeah, just kind of in the works of trying to build out what I'm going to be putting towards a raffle that's going towards to help some of the people out there. Green Gold Collective is one of them. Dank Clouds is another member of our community. He's a younger cat, but he's a humble person, and he's been doing a lot to kind of help us in the traditional market. So any way we can help out, we've just kind of been organizing that. My old partner Hashhound out here in Grass Valley has been organizing the fundraiser. Any glass artists or any other brands that want to help out and pitch in, please reach out to either me or Hashhound710 on IG. I know we have Heads That Roll, it's part of it. Medicinal Clouds, it's a part of it. The Real Ridge Boys, myself, and a few others, a bunch of glass artists. So it's going to be a huge raffle. All the proceeds are going to go towards the fire victims from the park fire. So that's pretty much what we're focusing on the next couple of weeks.
Oh, that's really awesome that you're putting that together, Nick. Yeah, really tragic. This is the time of year where we live out here in fire country on the West Coast, and sadly, every year we seem to lose some farms, we seem to lose some hash makers, and yeah, so sad to see people losing their homes. Just tragic out there, man, and that fire is not under control yet, huh?
I think it's 360,000 acres as of today, with like less than 15% containment.
So
it's pretty intense.
I know we had a big fire up in Humboldt, up in Willow Creek, that was threatening a bunch of folks, a bunch of farmers that we know, and then our friends Dragonfly Earth Medicine up in British Columbia have a fire very close to their farm. They've been in a very scary battle for the last week or so. So yeah, sending out lots of prayers for rain and some relief from these hot temperatures for everybody. And it's always awesome to see how this community pulls together when people are in need, And so thank you to you and those other hash makers doing that, man. Let us know how we can help and support with that and help get the word out about that. Yeah, it's good work on that one. Yeah.
And how about just trying to stay cool and keep our garden going through this heat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we want to hear all about that. Let me welcome Adam to the show here. Simply Adam, good homie, been solventless since day one. One of the first dudes who ever really introduced me to some real melt. Got mad love for you, Adam. Thanks for joining us today, buddy. How you doing?
That's a trip to hear that, Joey. Crazy.
It was really through It was through the homie Frumbolt, the dear homie Frumbolt back in the day during the BHO days. And he said, I got this buddy up in Arcata. You got to meet, you got to try his stuff. It'll knock your socks off. And he was right, Adam. I'd certainly seen some plenty of bubble hash at that time, but very few that could compare to what you were doing at the time. And yeah, I'm just, we all know you're still doing it, buddy, better than ever. Yeah, where are you at today? I know you got a new little home, new little farm you're running, and tell us what temperature are you at today? Hottest part of the day.
I thankfully didn't Chaz the banger that time. I took a nice little tasty, I sipped on it, gave it, I put some respect on it. But yeah, no, thanks for the compliments, y'all. I'm still thinking about like the fire, and I don't mean to bring down the energy and stuff, but that's cool at what you're doing, Rackhams. And I love seeing like folks that are, using their platforms for like good things and actually trying to change shit. So that's pretty awesome. And yeah, I'm here. I did just move. So, and then I could change the topic by saying, instead of turning on, tuning in, and dropping out, just melt on, melt in, and dab out. That's how we get that going. That's what I always say, So shout out Tim Leary. Also shout out Melton John for creating that little quote. It's all about the catchphrases nowadays. It's all about that kind of stuff. I do have a timer on. I have 9 minutes, and so forgive me. But yeah, I did move a little bit north from where you remember me living, Joey. And it's still rental with multiple carpentry failures. But the lawn and all the stuff, it's like black gold out there, just beautiful soil. And I got to unearth 2 little greenhouses that were used by previous tenants for multiple things. And so I just used the beds that they had already built and inside the little depths. And I have a little personal cannabis garden going. And then we have potatoes and sunflowers and 4 chickens, which is a new thing for us, so it's we're turning into hippies, just like you, Joey. We're going right back to the old days, really feeling it. I'm earthing every morning, Joey.
Good.
And sitting on my wooden bench that I built. But yeah, so I quoted Ram Dass. What did we do? What else did we do? Let's switch it up, guys. Can we talk more about you guys and less about me? And thank you so much for having me. And we'll hang out. And what else we got going on here? I have 7 minutes.
You can't. We've only got 8 minutes with you by my count. We want to hear about this last Coffee and Donuts event.
Oh, yes.
In Michigan. So tell us all about that. It looked like a blast. You have all of our favorite hash makers were there. Tell us all about it and what you got next.
It really was a blast, man. They keep evolving. And so going back a little bit, Coffee and Donuts started in Portland, Maine. It's the first live event of Coffee and Donuts. And we've done Oklahoma and Colorado, Denver, and then this recent one was in Michigan, Manistee, Michigan. Fun fact, a lot of the lumber that was harvested in Manistee, Michigan is what built Chicago. Did you guys know that? Now you know. And then I learned all kinds of other cool stuff there. But we did an event in 2 different locations, which was a strange thing for us. Like, we were running around like Barnum and Bailey, and we had a pop-up tent outside of a metric facility in Michigan. So, you're not allowed to, ingest and do things inside a facility. So we had to figure out a way to enjoy ourselves there. And so across the railroad from the facility was a place where we had a big tent, and it was right on the river. And then on the other side of the railroad was the actual lab. And so the first day was lab day, and we had all kinds of people. Fred, I don't need to go off and name all the folks because it really has turned into its own thing, and I'm so relieved that I don't have to go through all the stress and anything that it goes on with necessarily coordinating. I'm more of a creative consultant, for these things. No, but it was a lot of fun. We went in depth in the lab, and then the second day that we were in the Ironworks facility is what it was called, and it was an old Ironworks building, iron manufacturing of some sort, and it had natural lighting, like the huge glass panels, and like it felt like you were in like a cathedral or something. It was really cool to just kind of like relax and breathe and like realize what was actually happening was we were smoking inside this 100-year-old Ironworks, like vintage American manufacturing facility. It felt eerie, and it was really cool. There was like big smooth concrete panels everywhere, so I was able to like skateboard because shout out Xavier and Hoona Hash in Michigan, and Ross. Xavier and Ross are who run Hoona Hash is their brand, and that was their facility for the first day. And yeah, they were great hosts, and it went amazing. Mostly because of Xavier. He's the MVP. X gonna give it to you, and he is killing it. They did an iceless wash, while me and Fred did a wash inside of a plastic washing machine. So when we had those going simultaneously, so Connor Terp Wizard was doing the iceless wash, and then and Hoona, Xavier and Connor were kind of collabing in that respect because Connor has never really done that iceless before. So he was kind of just jumping into that. You need a glycol chiller and all this fancy stuff that requires to do it. It is possible, because we just want to make that plant material flexible and that resin brittle. So it really doesn't matter how you're doing it as long as you're doing that. With ice, with ice and water, is required in something where you don't have you don't have the money to invest in something like that. You got to use ice. So we tried to show both ways. And you wouldn't obviously want to make hash like on a commercial scale in a plastic washing machine, so we were really kind of dedicated more to the people that were like on a, $400 or $500 budget. And so like we basically went into it with a $400 or $500 budget and showed how to do it on that scale. And so we had like a drain in the room, which was cool. So we just, washed in a room that wasn't cold, for the folks. And then on the TV screen, we had beaming in what Connor and Xavier were doing inside the cold room. And we had people walking in the cold room in groups of like 15 or 20 a few times throughout the day. So it wasn't like we were hanging out in the cold room all day, on lab day. It was like we were kind of weaving people throughout the facility because it was it's one of the nicest facilities I've ever seen. Like picture like epoxy ground and like just anything that you could think of is there for you at your disposal. And so thanks to Ross and Xavier for that. It was really a great experience. And yeah, man, coffee and donuts, like I said, it turns into its own beast. It's turned into its own beast and really has evolved. Like we do tastings, so we're featuring different artists that have gone out of their way to travel and bring like an experience to the audience. So they have a chance if they want to like go on the mic and talk about what they brought and maybe why or what it is and all that. And it's as simple as that. It's like you're able to experience the work of someone who's actually there, which is kind of a rare thing, and they can drop the mic if they want to or not. And then so that happened actually throughout both days. And so there was a lot of hash and a lot of folks stuff going around. Sorry, my the mower is going in the back, so I'm just gonna mute myself.
Adam, I want to hear a little bit more about those tastings because I know that's something we talked about a little bit when you were here at our event at our farm. And I want to know who'd you get to do the tastings with this time? What were those? What were those entries? Different consistencies and stuff. People talking about how they're actually making it. What do you get to hear? And then I want to welcome Daniel of Heart Rock Mountain Farm just joining us too. Hey, Daniel, we'll bounce over to you here in a little bit. welcome. Thanks for joining us.
What's up, yeah, Daniel? And so I wrote it down, Joey, so I wouldn't forget. And that was the question was on the tastings, and I'll try to name a few of them. I'll probably forget, and I don't want to be rude, but I'll try my best. But there was the first day we had Jay Bunting. I'm blanking on his brand, and that's annoying because it was like one of the most complex flavors that we.
Is this Arrow
smoked.
Arrow solventless? Is that his?
It is not. It's not.
Different Jay.
This guy is out of New Jersey. We were in Manistee, Michigan when this was happening. The first thing being smoked, and it was actually a pairing with coffee. So I knew that it was a Super Skunk hybrid, and I don't want to say. I mean, let's see here. It was like sour BX of some sort crossed with Super Skunk, and so yeah. So whatever. I'm sorry. I'm not going to remember exactly all the things and all the brands and stuff, but there was a lot going on. But Jay Bunting first day paired it with an Ethiopian coffee, so it was like a skunky type of complexity. Not exactly like the roadkill skunk, but there was that old school vibe going on with it. And the dab was like not like things that are normally on the market. Like normally it's like fruit candy, whatever. Like and I don't want to get that specific because it's more dynamic than that, but. Really, a lot of people are running the same things, especially here in California. And so it was cool to like see new stuff, and that was one of them. So that was the first one. And then there was a person named Peachy, and that was I think a permanent marker. And what they did was they did a permanent marker. Maybe it was a hybrid, I'm not sure, but of both different. Maybe it was like two different consistencies, so people got to try both. And see, give some feedback on that. The tastings are hosted by different people, so sometimes I'll host it, or sometimes Shiragam will host it, or, sometimes it makes more sense to like have somebody else host it, so, and then what else do we do? We had, on the second day, it got crazy. Well, so yeah, one of the ones that really stick in my mind is the yellow Zushi. And actually he brought two different Skittles for people to try as well with the yellow Zushi, and that was blind, so people didn't know what they were smoking, so like and that was Fort Windy, and Fort Windy got a lot of feedback from the audience because he was kind of giving incentive for folks to put a word in on it or whatever they thought the experience, and that's a lot, because you got to dab three things back to back, and it's like, well, what exactly, how well can these folks really actually explain it? But I was surprised that, a lot of people had a lot of the same opinions on the three samples. So like one was a little bit more crystalline than another. And that one tended to be the one that people thought kind of bit the throat a little bit more than all the others, And so that was kind of cool to see that. But I mean, it was very flavorful and clean. So don't get me wrong. I just mean like one of them had this like bite, and it might have been necessary just because of the state of which it was in, not necessarily like the flavor or whatever. And so yeah, it's cool to see like the different perspectives on things because everybody experiences things differently, but we can all score similarly using the metric system. We can all be like sort of, as objective as we possibly can and unbiased and reasonable as we can. But that's why I like to, at like the Smoking Jacket, for example, we do tastings that are not blind, like what you're smoking and what you're experiencing, and you can kind of calibrate that and have this like experiential understanding of what quality is, or at least you're seeing like some good stuff along with your kit, which is like blind, and you're not necessarily knowing what you're going to go through. And on that, I'm kind of going all over the place, but I actually need to leave soon. So, yeah, pardon me, y'all. I have to take a vehicle to a place to get it fixed.
Adam, when is the next Smoking Jacket event going to be? Is that going to be the next one before we see another Coffee and Donuts?
It will be. I think Coffee and Donuts is actually going to go international to Spain next year. It won't be in the States. So we'll be doing like maybe tastings at different clubs in Spain. And then, but the smoking jacket's going to come way before that in September. So that's coming up right now. Like if you're going to enter, you need to be like thinking about what, hopefully you got plants flowering right now if you're trying to enter that. But yeah, I think those tickets will come out in waves, and I'm not in charge of that. So like, definitely, you can hit me up, but I'm just going to refer you to the smoking jacket page, see if you're interested in trying to be with that. There is a fee, and then it's going to happen in September 18th, I believe. Or no, I need to get in there on the 18th. You can fly into Syracuse to save some money, but it's going to be in Ithaca, New York. And it's going to be at the JP Toro Gallery, I guess. I'm not really sure. I haven't gotten like specifics and stuff. And the person that does all the work into organizing this is in Colombia and kind of out of touch right now. But as soon as he gets back, I'm sure he's going to get right to work because there's a lot to do. And, there's folks working behind the scenes right now, but I'm not really sure because thankfully I don't have to take on any of that stress. So take what I said with a grain of salt,
Yeah, thank you, Adam. That sounds like an awesome event. We're super excited for the ones coming up. And yeah, if you're trying to get a hold of Adam, don't message the Coffee and Donuts page. They will just laugh at you and tell you, ha 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 ha. Yeah, we can't get Adam to deal with any of this shit. Good luck. That's what they did to me last week. So,
really?
Yeah.
Damn it. I'm always getting in trouble for things that he's done with my name, but that's okay. He's like a sphinx, He like, yeah. Anyways.
Well, we love you. We appreciate all you're doing for the hash community and bringing people together and elevating people's craft and helping.
Thanks,
shine.
Joey,
Yeah. Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And yeah, thanks for joining us today, man. You're always welcome. We're trying to do this every week or so, and
right. Yeah. No, I'll probably join next week. Shoot me the link, and I appreciate y'all. I hope to tune into this talk later and hear about what you guys talked about without me, and keep up the good energy. And thank you. And have a good day.
Have a good one, Adam.
Cheers.
All right, now we can talk about Adam because he's not here. How you doing, Daniel? How's your day going?
Doing pretty good, yeah.
You're up there in Potter Valley, about an hour north of me in Mendocino, right?
Yeah, northwest of you. Yeah.
How hot is it up there today?
Oh, it's been nice actually. It's been in the 80s the past couple of days. So.
Yeah, the last couple of days have been really nice down here. We've been getting a lot of work done, catching up on stuff.
It was that 2-week heat wave we had here that was like unbearable.
Yeah, we had 13 days over 100 degrees in a row, and it was brutal. And we survived. We escaped to Humboldt for a couple of days up to the coast. That helped, and our plants did good. We saw other people's gardens that had serious heat damage. We heard of people replanting their light depths and coming back 4 hours later, and all the plants were dead.
We had some pretty bad leafhopper damage during the heat wave, where there's the plants, because that's one of the things that to defend against leafhoppers is like well watered plants. And yeah, we definitely, I lost some a couple dozen plants that were good size to leafhopper. I've never seen it before.
Daniel, when you say leafhoppers, do you mean leafhoppers or do you mean real grasshoppers? Because we're not experiencing.
Oh yeah. Real leafhoppers that do the curly top virus thing. So yeah.
I've experienced that real bad, but this year I'm seeing reports of the worst grasshopper damage I've ever seen. Friends of ours up on Bell Springs are losing whole plants. People are losing whole depth hoops to grasshoppers. And
my friend in the Eel River watershed here is about to lose. He lost his whole garden to grasshoppers.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, and then
I think we could. They should probably just make protein bars out of them and feed them to liberals.
Well, our friends had their kids go out and gather them, and they were dipping them. They had some bags of chocolate dipped grasshoppers at the last regen sesh. So I hope somebody scored some of that.
Yeah, yeah. When life gives you lemons, you know.
What do you think the cause of this grasshopper infestation is?
Crazy weather,
I mean, it's
man.
a pretty big bug year all around.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
whenever these.
we're seeing blooms of all kinds of bugs.
Yeah, I had them. I had them like 20 years ago. It was the first year I had my Humboldt farm. I just moved onto this farm. I brought all these starts into this area where it's just a field of dead grass, no other green plants or anything. I had like 20 plants there, and the grasshoppers just came in, started eating the leaves down to where it was just the vein of the leaf left. And I just kind of moved them around the yard. I just moved them to a different far end of the yard. It was just 20 plants, and I think my weather changed, and they just kind of went away. But I remember going out there early in the morning when they couldn't move and I was squishing them. But that was before we really knew about the kind of, Jadam pesticides that we make now. I'd be really curious to try some of that. Our friends on Bell Springs said they were having mixed results with that, but they're just being overwhelmed. They said that little leaf vein, that is also being eaten on their plants. There's nothing left.
Wow.
Crazy. So, yeah. Wondering if anybody's got any solutions to that. I've been really trying to ask all my farmer friends about that one.
Let the chickens in?
They said they let their chickens in, and the chickens were scared. It was overwhelming because it was just like they're covering the ground. The chickens ran away. It was too many.
God. Yeah.
They were thinking that that the grasshoppers were looking for water. I suggested just putting saucers of water out, just putting out more water sources. We're always encouraging people to set up little ponds and little saucers of water under their drip emitters in their garden, because often gophers and voles are often looking for water. Mice too, when they're chewing up the ganja. So we always felt like we attracted more snakes and more birds and just more everything. We're leaving little water around our garden. So I take clone trays that don't have the holes in them, and I'll triple stack 3 of those, and I'll stick them in my garden under a couple drip emitters with a rock in place in a shady spot. So every day, or whenever my drip's going off, pretty much every day right now, they'll get topped off, and I'll always have some fresh water sources. But other than that, I didn't have much recommendations for these.
Yeah, no, I saw some news articles too. I know, like the first ones I saw were like my friends in Chico area and stuff, and yeah, they had like 1 and 2 year old fruit trees just gone. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just another sign that the apocalypse.
Yeah, the plague. I heard that our friends on Bell Springs were having luck with bug netting, wrapping a whole full-term plant in bug netting. That was the only way they were able to save some of their plants, but
that's crazy.
Pretty brutal. That's up on the Bell Springs neighborhood of Mendo, so I imagine they're hitting people hard in that area. What are you growing this year, Daniel? You got some of our favorite strains. The Forbidden Swazi was one we grew last year. The Lemonhead OG. I did a bunch of breeding with both of these. What's popping for you this year?
Well, I'm growing some Gmob F3, but the purple banana pheno that we selected from the F2 I'm really excited for that one. And I'm growing some Citrus Sunrise, which is Lemon Fire OG that my friend's Rivershy Farms made. And then I crossed that into Tangy, and that's to a F3 now. And it's just, you walk by the row where that's in, you could be 10 feet away from it, and you just start drooling with so I got 6 of those in my veggie garden this year, just really, and we got some for production over on the farm. And then of course grown Lemonhead. I think I have growing some F4 and F5 generations of the Lemonhead, growing some Swazi Gold, some Citron, a bunch of Love Laughter. Soulful's been picking that up, and actually they did tincture with it. So there's CB right now. If you buy a CBDA tincture at the Soulful store, it's from our Love Laughter. And they bought a bunch. That's our best seller, is our high CBD, that in the Lemonhead right behind it. Awesome. And we're doing a full nursery or almost full nursery this year. One of my tanks got crushed by a tree for my high garden nursery, and so. And that's I just have storage for that. It's like that gets me through the year on that little plot. I don't like refill them. So and it's just me and one other person, an intern. I think I just need to scale back even further, just to give it more. But I'm excited for the nursery we do have, and there's at least 4 new like lemon head hybrids I've been working on. Like I got the holy lemon head, and my dad texted me the other night because I dropped him off a sample of the holy lemon, and he said, "Holy, that's good."
Oh yeah.
And then I have a purple lemon head, which is the Velvet Perps by Lemon Head, and it's been back crossed to the lemon head. So my seed selection last year was lemon head structure, lemon head nose with just a splash of purple in it. So yeah, and then I got a couple other lemon head hybrids that I'm really excited about. And I got some Mawali seeds from this expat that I'm friends with. And his friends have been keeping these going since the 80s. Supposedly, he said they test at like 20% THCV. So,
Wow. Are those?
I mean, even if it's
are those going to have an orange nose? I love that African orange. It's the heirloom Malawi by Agent Orange.
Oh yeah, I don't know. It's they look like they're going to be late. And yeah, so it's my first time growing those. So I'm excited about those. And then I have a pineapple haze I'm really excited about. It's just it was such. I might still have enough to roll a joint of when I see you in Oakland, because it was just such a nice sativa. I mean, the flavor on it, like the uplifting high, like you feel it like right away, just lifted you right up. So I'm excited. I have F2s of those going, so I'm excited to make the F3 on that. And I got another. I crossed Noah's haze, which is haze 19, with Santa Cruz Mountain haze, and they're pretty much identical. So I'm growing some of those out in the nursery, and yeah, it's just definitely fun to have an insane amount of flavors growing in the nursery again.
Yeah. Nick, what are you growing? What are you and your lady got going in the room right now? And are you guys doing any outdoor this year as well?
Yeah, we have our next round. We're about to flip this week. We're doing a coup d'etat from PCG Genetics, Purple City. And then, which we're not too sure about. We don't have much information about it. I don't know too many people who ran it before. A few gardens that are running it right now that aren't too happy with the flower, but they're also flower producers, and we're focusing on resin production. So that might be in our favor when it comes to that cultivar. But we'll find out here in the next few weeks. And then we have our staples, our Super Boof, which is all around amazing flower and resin production. We have our Peach Panther, which can be a little finicky at times, but it's been pumping out some really nice terpene profiles. Outdoor, we have, I think, both of those, and then some RS11, which has always done us really well. We have Strawberry Jelly from Turf Wizard out of Michigan that we popped seeds from last year and hunted through the phenoms of. And then we have Cran Malo from Califunkia out of Georgetown. He produced those genetics. I think that's horchata crossed with Margie's Muff. And then some champagne. So nice little variety.
Oh yeah, killer genetics there, man. I've got one plant of that coup d'etat that Califunkia Ricky gave me as well, so I'm excited to see how that goes for you. Ours is looking really good. It's still very small, but I think I'll have enough just to do a tiny little wash of it. Yeah, you got some killer genetics, man.
We've been hearing from farms that it's a stretcher, and also PCG said it was a 9-weeker, but everybody I've talked to that's flowered it so far has harvested around that 9-week point, and it's still very underdeveloped. So I'm assuming because of the GMO lineage in there somewhere that probably carried over, it's probably going to give a good 10, 11-weeker for sure, which is fine.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Nick, so you're doing some indoor, some outdoor. You've washed a ton of material over the years. I just did a wash yesterday. One plant that we grew in a greenhouse last year, the only plant we had in our greenhouse, everything else we did outside. A different pheno of another plant that we had washed, the same strain, different pheno, but the other one had been from outside. We'd washed that first. This one we washed yesterday, and there was so much good hash in the 160 bag. Where usually our other outdoor washes, the 160 bag is throwaway, not even food grade. We don't run a bag above that. I do a 250 wash bag, work bag, and then I'm going into that 160 is my first catch. I was just amazed how much clean hash was in there. Good looking hash. We're saved. We kept it. Is really just outdoors. Is that really the difference? That much dirt and dust. I mean, like I said, these were two different phenos, seed plants, so they're going to be completely different to some extent. But is that really that noticeable in your experience? Just dirt, dust, contamination from outdoors versus being in a greenhouse or an indoor room?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on the amount of traffic you have driving by or the type of roads you have around your outdoor environment, if there's heavy traffic around there or really dusty roads, you're going to have more potential to deal with a lot more contamination in that regard than you would a greenhouse like that or an indoor, obviously. That's just kind of the way of the beast when it comes to dealing with resin, whether it's sun grown or not. As far as the micron size, with my experience, I have noticed a lot of the bigger trichome production, as far as microns are concerned, is usually produced within an outdoor sun-grown environment. Um, Not too many farms that I wash for, or even our own, produce a lot of the bigger heads in the 120 and the 160 range. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's impact on quality. It's just those type of heads are being produced better with direct sunlight and natural environment. Um, it's pretty cool to see sometimes. A lot of the material I've been working with recently, I've had nothing in the 160, like literally not even a spoonful. So I started using that for a lot of my indoor production as my throwaway bag. Like that's where the first one that I'll just toss because there's typically nothing in there. But a lot of the green or not greenhouse, but sun grown terps or resin that I've been producing as well for other farms, I'm usually having to put a 180 bag on top of the 160 in order to keep any type of that bigger contamination out of the 160 so I can clean up the 160 as much as possible and then everything below it. Seems to help pretty well when dealing with that. But yeah, back to the original question, I feel like contamination is going to be something that you won't be able to get away from when it comes to outdoor harvest, especially depending on how the outdoor harvest was managed, how when they're harvesting, if you're doing a dunk into a water reservoir to kind of rinse it off, or even if the farmer is beforehand before harvest doing a wash down type of spray with like a 2.5 or 11.5 Kangen water, that can usually benefit you with knocking off a lot of the contamination prior to harvest. It's something to take in mind and consideration when harvest date does come, to kind of lessen up. You'll get rid of a lot of the pest contamination and also their feces. Not all, but a good majority of it if you're doing that prep before harvest. So that's something to kind of take in as food for thought coming up on your next harvest.
And then Nick, I've heard some people, especially washing outdoor material, will do like a really quick wash of the material and just kind of throw that first wash away. What are your thoughts on
I've heard
that?
that. I mean, I understand the quick wash, but to disregard that wash and throw it away, I I wouldn't do that personally myself because there's still value in that. There's still valuable product in that, even though it might be a little bit more heavier contaminated than your second, third, or fourth wash, post washes from that first wash. I wouldn't throw it away. I would at least keep it, dry it, examine it after the fact once it's dry, and make that determination. Maybe keep that as a B grade type of rosin or a B grade type of hash. But you got to think included with the contamination from an outdoor harvest on that first wash, you're still having the most ripest heads that are already either broken off or are breaking off at that point, falling into your bags. So unless you, the only other way to kind of mitigate that would to to possibly take it out, and then once you're done with your wash, you maybe toss that first wash back in your collection bags and do another thorough rinse through it to kind of push any other type of contamination that you might have missed through the bags, and clean it up that way. But that's really your only other way, in my opinion. Because you just mentioned this question or brought it up, I always usually try to say, like, you see on certain jars, certain rosin jars or whatnot, and certain brands will say first wash this, first wash that, and you'll see that it's sun grown. And with marketing tactics and things of that nature, you're trying to push on your consumer that your first wash is your best wash, right? With indoor and greenhouse or light depths, that probably could be the case, but with sun growing, I mean, depending on your environment, and like we just discussed with harvesting practices, your first wash isn't always going to be your first wash or your best wash because of that contamination that's falling off right there at the get go. So I usually don't like to involve, at least with my brand, what washes are being involved with the final product, because I don't think that has a correlation on the end product that's being presented to the clientele. Um, I don't think there's a difference between your first wash and your fourth wash, except for the cleanliness of your first wash. So, in my opinion, if you had to actually put a point on it, your second and third wash, or even washes after that, are going to be your most clean hash that you're going to produce, more so than your first wash, in regards to sun grown, not necessarily indoor or light depth. And you could have sun grown that has an environment that's really clean. You got no traffic. It's out of the way of roads. It's out of the way of dust and things of that nature. Maybe surrounded by trees, whatnot. But that's not always the case for most sun-grown applications, right?
Yeah, that's so true. We see these, big outdoor grows run the gamut from dirty to dusty to really clean and big and small and all different shapes and sizes. But yeah, I hear that over and over again, that the simplest things people could do to improve their hash is not drive next to their grow, or to at least put some straw down, anything to knock that dust down. Seems like that is the biggest contaminant and the leading cause of boof, B grade rosin. Yeah, B grade hash. You have any pointers for people heading into this fall, heading into harvest? We're about to start flowering right now. People's plants are just starting to throw hairs. We're all we're all dealing with a lot of pests still, and heavy pest pressure. So people are still having to spray a lot. Any pointers for people having to, hoping to cut their spraying off as soon as possible? What as a hash maker, what do you want these farmers to do to make their material better for you going into the fall?
I mean, preventative maintenance, mainly until you start flowering, or within that first week or two to flower, if you have to. Like, just preventative maintenance as much as possible, with any type of organic enzyme that's available to you. Us personally, we have the Kangen water machine, so we use a lot of the 2.5 and 11.5 and go back and forth between those, not only for PM but for pests and dust, and just kind of keeping our plants nice and healthy and green. It seems to produce a lot. Seems to actually help, as long as it's a consistent process that you're doing, instead of just doing a rinse off on 1 week and then forgetting about it for a couple of weeks. I mean, you can even use the 2.5, 11.5 water through flower all the way up to harvest. So we usually like to recommend that any farm that's going to be working with us when it comes to running their material is to give their plants a rinse off. If you don't have Kangen water, I mean, obviously pH proper water, prior to harvest, and then harvesting at the coldest temperature of the day possible, which is obviously kind of hard for some people if that's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but it'll be beneficial for you in the long run, and for us as well as a maker, to represent your resin as best as possible. There's little things like that, when it comes to harvest, big leafing as much as you can prior to harvesting, so you're not having to deal with that while you're harvesting the flower. Um, Also, really good proper dry back on the back end of your harvest, making sure that it's giving your plants, in my opinion, the opportunity to kind of pump up that last little bit of resin within the glands and do their job. and then you just get kicked on to harvest. Obviously, I've been managing more and more harvest as the years go by and trying to implement the post harvest process that I feel is beneficial for my program. And that involves everything I just said, on top of being very delicate with your plants. Not just grabbing your colas, because there are people that are hired that don't really have the mindset or knowledge of harvesting, especially for fresh frozen material. You got to remember that we're not necessarily we're not necessarily focused on the biomass per se, but the resin glands that are on that said biomass. And if you're touching any of that, even the sugar leaves or even fan leaves that might have resin on it, you're destroying those heads left and right. And then you expect you're going to get 4 or 5% from this yield from these cultivars, and you end up getting 2 or 3 because of how it was managed physically, and also how it was stored after the fact, coming into the freezers. There's a lot of people who do a cryo freeze, pre-freeze before it goes into freezers. Some people are still choosing to use vac sealing, which is brutal. It just hurts my heart when a farmer gives me bags of vac sealed material that's frozen, and they're like this crazy football or brick. But yeah, there's steps and ways that can be mitigated to make sure that your harvest is going to be not only profitable, but be able to show off your hard work throughout the year.
Yeah, those are all really good pointers, Nick. I really appreciate that insight coming directly from the hash maker. I want to ask you, I want to talk about fresh frozen prep, but before that, I want to bounce back to what you mentioned, dry back. This is a term I've heard so many times on Instagram the last week. I'm like, dry back it's dry back summer. I thought it was the brat summer, but it's dry back summer. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. And when you talk about dry back before harvest, are you talking about a day, 24 hours, 48 hours? Or are you talking about in several weeks of giving the plant a lot less water as we get into harvest? Are we talking about two different things there? And are we talking differently indoors and outdoors? Elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I've just learned about the phrase dry back just recently, this last year, and I didn't realize it was essentially what all of us do between waterings. If I'm understanding right, so you water one day, and then you dry back a day or so, and then you water your next day. And I'm more talking specifically with our indoor garden, because that's how we kind of do it when we're flowering. We have every other day watering periods. So our dry back is essentially 24 hours. But with the end of the run, I would assume that it would be the same concept with outdoor somewhat, compared to indoor, which is our main focus here. But at the end of the run, our last week, we'll do just straight flushing for the solid week, and then for usually the last 24 to 72 hours, we'll just let it dry back and get the pots as dry as possible. That's usually We usually do that when the plant decides to tell us that it's at the end of its life cycle. Big fan leaves are starting to go yellow, starting to kind of fall off and die off and whatnot. I would imagine the same concept would be applied to the outdoor. Um, in my head and my theory is it's causing the plant to kind of search and strive for more water, but then also produce, from my experience, a slightly better, more bulbous resin gland at the end of that process. Also, to add to that, temperature wise, the reason that I talked about harvesting at a colder temperature is it gives those resin glands an opportunity to kind of solidify just a bit more, and be a little bit more tangible, for lack of better words, more solidified, I guess. I've noticed that in our indoor garden, when I experimented with it, we would drop our temperatures down to below 65 degrees for a solid 3 to 4 days, and just get it really, really cold and really dark. And we'll put them in a dark light period. Obviously, with outdoors, you can't really do that because you're at the midst of Mother Nature. But if you can get as close to all of those parameters as possible, I've noticed that the resin glands become a little bit more sandier and a little bit more tangible, like I said before, and you can handle them better. Even with strains that are more known to produce a greasier resin, if you implement these procedures, you should notice that it gets a little bit more gritty, and that's just it makes my life a lot easier in the washroom, and it also allows me to show the maximum possible yields from that cultivar if it's never been ran in a hash lab before.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Hey, welcome to the show, Tamara Thorne. Just slid on in here for a dab. Hopefully, she'll stick around. Hey, Daniel, what are your thoughts on that? I know you're a sun grower up there in Mendo. Here in Lake County, we have to water every day. Our dry back is 12 hours, and I have to water it in the middle of the night. Otherwise, it just evaporates. It's a totally different experience than I ever had up there in Humboldt and Mendo. And it's only these last 3 days that I've got one garden where I really turn my water back a little bit, but I'm still having to water every day. But Daniel, what are your thoughts on dry back, letting your plants dry out like that? And are you mostly in the ground? You've got some raised beds. What are you growing in?
Yeah, in ground, we got some terraces that are more like raised bed, although they're in ground, they're just smaller. And then we have some hugels. We have the inline drip emitters and under a layer of local hay. So we're about every 3 days we're watering. Just kind of, drought farming. We in our watershed, we just don't have a lot of water. But I know with garlic, like they say, if you don't water it, it's more flavorful. So it makes sense that with gone.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, this is my first. This is my first real true season of outdoor, kind of being more hands-on with it. Like the outdoor beds we have are raised beds that have been in place for the last 6 years. My mother-in-law's been managing our outdoor garden. It's just a personal garden, 6 to 8 plants. She's 74 years old. She waters her vegetable garden and waters her cannabis garden at the same time. So I am when it comes to levels of knowledge and education for sun growing and outdoor applications, I'm a novice. So the more I can soak up from people like y'all, the better. My experience comes into the harvesting application and post processing the hash. So I'm still learning the whole regenerative process, the K&F process. We're starting our own compost pile now. We haven't tilled our beds in the last 5 years. We just do the topsoil and teas and whatnot. But any more tips and tricks that you guys yourselves, all three of you, can toss my way, that I would be so thankful and in debt.
Yeah, buddy. Well, the thing we love about regenerative farming, it can seem like this intimidating thing because it is something new to learn, but all the practices that we use are just easy. Like none of us would bother with it if it was difficult. So they're all really easy to learn too, and really easy to adapt. And what we always try to hammer home to people that is, being a regenerative farm, there is no end goal. It's always evolving. We're always learning something new. It's really about the journey and where can we improve, where can we reduce waste streams, and where can we turn waste into resources. And so yeah, starting with your compost pile and adding some chickens like Adam was saying, and these are the good first steps. Once you have some easy sources of manure, and those are the good places to start for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a local place up here in Grass Valley that we deal with a lot of manure, so it's all locally sourced and whatnot. So yeah, man, our compost pile is becoming a long way. It's pretty cool. We're collecting all of our eggshells. We're collecting all of our scraps, keeping our human waste separate because we do composting toilets. We live off grid. But yeah, it's been a real big learning experience for sure. Because I'm from the Bay and I'm from the city. We didn't really do that too much out there. And I've only been in the agriculture area for the past 2 years. So it's a nice learning experience.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I would encourage anybody, just get on that Facebook marketplace and start looking for free sources of manure, because we found a great local lady who has a bunch of horses. She's an organic gardener, so she's really mindful of the wormers and the different medications she gives the horse. And when she gives them that, she separates all that manure for several weeks. And we were able to go out there last year and fill up a big trailer when we still had a land mate here with a big truck and trailer, and put all that on our beds and just been coasting through on that all year.
Same with goat too. We have another lady that we like to go, and she's an elder that needs help raking out her stalls, and so we'll just go rake them out and collect all the goat manure. And we usually like to have our rabbits. So rabbits are super, like they're easy. As long as you have a place that's cool for them, you just feed them from your garden some extra grains, and you have so much manure that you can put on just immediately, or do some teas with, whatever you need to do. Like I love rabbit poop. I think it is the shit. It's also high in nitrogen and phosphorus. Like it has a really nice balanced consistency. And so, yeah, that's kind of one of my favorites. I like to really plant that seed for people because rabbits are pretty great like that.
It's a point that you bring up, the nitrogen side. But I've noticed that our plants they're looking beautiful and they're really filling out. But the inner portion of our plants, our outdoor plants, are starting to kind of wither away, turn yellow, and die. And I've talked to a few people, and it's been the same consensus across the board. So I'm wondering if you guys feel the same way, of these plants probably having a deficiency in nitrogen, besides the heat that we've been dealing with. But I'm curious on what you guys think. That's the only thing that I've noticed that's been an issue with our plants so far, is just the closer to the main stock starting to yellow off and die internally.
Huh. I mean, there's some of that just happens naturally as the plant gets bigger.
It's probably the heat and not getting enough water, because I had some plants that I didn't water enough, and yeah, those big leaves died back first.
That's what my hemp plants did too. We were realizing one of the rows wasn't getting enough water, especially after that 115 degrees. The inside leaves, they tend to yellow first.
Okay.
Yeah, are you in smart pots? Are you in the ground? What are those plants in?
They're in raised beds.
Yeah, and it's hot out there where you are. You had 115-degree days out there, yeah.
Yeah, the last 3 days it's finally cooled down. So maybe I'll give it this week and see if that kind of stops happening, and maybe we can correlate it to the heat. But if it's not, if it continues to happen even with our cooler weather, I'm assuming a nitrogen deficiency is probably at play.
I would try that.
I would think the whole plant would just look lighter in color, not just the insides.
That's true.
Have you experimented with any shade cloth out there? It's certainly something we've been talking about a lot lately, especially with people in hotter. You're in an even hotter area than we are.
That's the cool thing about our garden. We have a whole line of oak trees on one side and a couple of oak trees on the other side, and the garden kind of sits to where we, by the time it gets to about 3 or 4 o'clock, it hits shade, and it's shady until about probably anywhere between 8 to 10 o'clock. So it gets a decent amount of shade and actually not as much sun. It's weird because every time I've washed sun-grown resin in my last 8 years, this garden right here from my mother-in-law, who's 74 years old, has been the meltiest resin that I've produced yet. And I don't say that lightly because I'm very, very particular about using those words and that quality factor. Like we use 6-star, that term, right? That resin is the closest to 6-star resin I've ever produced in the last 8 years. And I'm equating it probably because of her practices is less is more, but also like the shady factor of it too. It's not constantly getting hit with that high direct sunlight all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, we've been hearing that a lot lately as well, that shade-grown resin is making the best hash. We've heard that from several growers. It seems to make a lot of sense. A lot of those volatile terpenes want to burn off at those higher temps. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, we're happy to hear that, man. You got a natural garden, natural shade there. We have a lot of fruit trees that Tamara's planted in our garden to kind of give some mixed shade here and there, because our plants don't need that much sun and heat here either. It's too much.
I used to do a technique where I would do burlap. I found a burlap that it was just a really good shade cloth. Not too weak, not too loose, and would put those above the plants. And I've thought about bringing that back, because I used to do that when I'd have clones and we would have, 100-degree weather when we'd first put them in. And so I'd always start them underneath there. And then by the time they got big, I'd take it off. But I'm also starting to think with the seed plants now in these 100-degree weathers, like maybe we start implementing that just a little bit more if it gets hot, because it was nice. And it's amazing how much that can just, like, the temperature can change about 10 degrees by putting that there. And it really helps them, like, because they stop growing also, I think it's after like 97 degrees or something. They're just like trying to survive. So if you're able to lessen that temp, it kind of like, I'm like, yeah, it's my thing.
That's kind of keeping it like a plant temperature. You would say.
Absolutely. Hey, Nick, while we got you here, you kind of touched on it a little bit, some tips for farmers doing their fresh frozen prep, not making footballs, not seal mealing them. Give us the rundown. Every year we're trying to improve our fresh frozen SOP. Last year the goal was it's got to be in the freezer in under a half hour, and we're only doing it in the early mornings, no sun on the plants. And I'm harvesting a half a tote at a time off the plant, covering it, rushing it to the room, breaking it down. What advice do you have for us on producing the best material, so when we go into the washroom, we know we're starting off on the best foot?
I mean, it comes down to the same basic information every time, no matter what, whether you're greenhouse, light depth, or indoor. Temperature controllability is definitely crucial. Trying to keep all your parameters as cold as possible at all times, not trying to have any type of spikes of heat or cold. And that's mainly for to preserve the condition of those trichome heads in the state that they're in. So producing, harvesting in colder temperatures, harvesting at night, harvesting, like I said, prior to harvest, de-leafing as much as possible if it can be done. Can benefit you. I know it's a little bit more work because you're spending days doing that first before you even touch the actual nugs, but it could be beneficial. Also, your time frame for harvest. Once you cut a plant and you take a stalk you take a stem off the stalk, and you have this long section of material you need to buck down. Technically, in my experience with talking to other makers and other people who have came before me, you have a window of about 4 hours. So you don't have to go crazy and try to get it cut and bucked down in a full bag into the freezer within 30 minutes. It's not really an doable option. It doesn't really make sense because that's just, you'll be rushing. You might mess some stuff up. Also, if you have people working for you, they're going to be rushing. So giving yourself at least that kind of 4 hour window gives you some time to breathe and think about what you're doing and be meticulous about your process. And come up with a proper game plan. And also, if you have like a line of people, you'll have one person bucking down. They'll be putting it on a table or in a bin. They'll be doing some big leafing there. Maybe the next stage will be big leafing, and then the next stage will be bucking, and then you'll have people running bags. Another trick that you can do is if you have a big enough ice chest or freezers on site, you can always put some dry ice in them and do a kind of a quick flash freeze. That kind of helps it with moisture too, because I don't know if you've noticed, but if you take a bag of material and you put it in a freezer, whether it's open or closed, you'll build condensation in there because that material is warmer than the freezer is. So it starts to kick off. That condensation, if you're not careful, can turn into freezer burn, depending on how much you're moving and dealing with your material post-harvest. That's another thing that I like to mention to people is once it's in the freezer, try not to move it or mess with it as too much as possible. You have a higher chance of breaking material open prior to it going into the wash, which could cause clam or chlorophyll contamination. So there's that to take in consideration. But the main focus is the colder the better. That's just going to preserve your resin glands the best possible way.
That was awesome, Nick.
That's rad.
Yeah. Here's a question that came up the last time we had a bunch of hash makers here was prepping that fresh frozen, cutting off leaves. Do you do cross cut on the leaf, or do you leave a little leaf on there? Are you worried about chlorophyll leaching out of there? That was a question that came up.
I've done both ways. And I feel like the jury's still out. What I try to look for with a cultivar that might not, well, let's put it this way. If we have a cultivar that doesn't have too much resin production on like sugar leaves and even fan leaves for that matter, obviously anything with the stem that has a leaf attached to it needs to be gone. That's just excess weight that won't add up to that won't help your data on the back end. If you're leaving stems in there, if you're leaving stalks in there, if you're leaving fan leaves, that's just, if you have 1,000 grams in a bag, technically you probably only have like maybe 800 or 900 grams in a bag of actual flour because of the contamination that's in there. With that being said, as far as cross cutting or not cutting at all, I think it depends on the amount of resin that's produced on those particular pieces that you're cutting. If there's, in my opinion, what I try to tell my workers, or which is my mother-in-law, my wife, so my family, is that if there is sugar on the sugar leaves or even smaller fan leaves that have resin on it, leave it, because that's money and that's product. That's finished, potentially finished product. But if there's very little to no resin on either the sugar leaves or the fan leaves, get rid of it. Now, as far as cross cuts, that can be a couple of variables that are at play at that point, because if you cut it and you don't freeze it as quickly as possible, then you could deal with the leaching of chlorophyll after the fact when it gets rehydrated or when it gets thawed out in the wash. Another trick to eliminate that, if people have the means and the ways to do so, is maybe try to dry your plants for a few days before you actually buck them down and freeze them. Now we call that a partial dry. Some people, in fact, a few years ago when I started talking about this tech, we call it like Jesus tech, bringing it back to life from the dead. But nonetheless, you're literally just hanging your plants, if you have the means to do so, for 72 hours or less. And that what that's doing is it's allowing some of the residual water weight to dissipate. So you aren't dealing with that chlorophyll leakage, and you're not having to worry about doing any type of side cuts or anything like that, because it'll also in turn raise your percentages of yield, because now you're dealing with less water weight. And on top of that, it might produce a slightly better terp profile that best represents the finished flour product versus a fresh flour product. Because if you think about it, those molecules in the beds are changing ever so slightly. Some of the more volatile stuff is off-gassing, which will then in turn produce a more typical terp profile of a finished flour product, a dry flour product, than a fresh frozen product. So there's that you can take into consideration as well.
Oh, that is so interesting, man.
Yeah, I like that. I'm interested in doing that with even, especially for like the temple balls. I like this idea.
I've done it before. I've done it a few times. I have a few people. There's a guy in Colorado, Pedro's Grow Room. He does a partial dry. He does anywhere between, I think, 3 to 5 days, and then he bucks down and freezes everything. I even know a few companies in California that are fresh frozen producers for the legal market. They have a bunch of farms, and they're sitting there talking about how they're hitting 7, 8, 9% to hash from their cultivars. It's like, well, how is that possible? I'm not hearing enough people talk about that. So you've got to be doing something different that we don't think about. And then the conversation stopped. We parted ways, and I thought about it. I was like, oh, he's got to be doing partial dry, because that's the only way you're going to up your yield, because you have less weight. And I talked to him a little bit more after the fact, and he said, yeah, that's what he's having his farms doing. So it's the same cultivars you and me and others might have, but he's implemented that partial dry to make it seem like you're getting a higher yield, when in fact you just have a higher yield because you have less water weight. But
yeah,
I've done it myself. It's nice. You get the best of both worlds. You get the higher yield, but you also get that best of both worlds between the fresh frozen terp profile and a finished flour terp profile.
I really like what you said, and I want to back it up to this point where you made during the process of your herb being warmer and creating that condensation inside. That is something I have been trying to figure out, like how there was ice inside when I knew how those bags were and how we did it before. So just by touching up, that was a very good aha moment, and I'm sure others have dealt with that as well, of not realizing that there's a correlation between that, because you're processing, and like you're saying, we were attempting to get everything in within a window of time, so you're processing as good as you can. You put it in, but not really thinking that's interesting. So thank you for that.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to mitigate that. Like you could experiment with, if you have a stand-up fridge, for example, or even a freezer that's turned all the way down to low, to its lowest or its highest setting, I guess you could say, so it's not as cold. If you put your plant material in something that's semi-cold, that should allow it to kind of acclimate down to that colder temperature. And then if you transfer from there to a freezer, that should be able to help you mitigate that condensation situation. On top of that, if you leave your bags open in the freezer prior or before, that can also help them kind of off gas that condensation a little bit. I know a guy in Southern California, California Alchemy. He's an old BHO guy who's been doing fresh frozen now, and he's been doing an amazing job down south. And every time he shows his harvest, it's always in totes or in open bins in the freezer. So the bags aren't crushing any of the flour. It's all just nice and laid there, fluffy. And he keeps them frozen like that with an open tote, not even covering it until he's ready to process it. So his fresh frozen material looks identical to it being on a fresh plant when it's going in the wash. It's pretty nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Yeah,
the only other way to mitigate that would be a flash freeze with dry ice. My problem with that is, like I'll always say, is to keep dry ice away from flour at all times. But if you're using it for a harvest purpose, if you have some type of barrier from the dry ice and the material, you might be able to get away with that kind of a quick flash freeze. So it just locks in all the moisture, and then you can put it in the freezer. That'll help mitigate the condensation situation. But it's still, you're dealing with dry ice, and we all know that those are cryo temperatures. So if any of your material touches that dry ice, or it gets frozen down to those temperatures, and you move that material, even if it's a couple of feet, the potential of you breaking that plant matter down to the size of the trichome heads increases even more so. And then in the wash, you have the potential to be dealing with more contamination on the back end if you didn't use the dry ice and just did it normal. So there's those type of variables to take into consideration.
Yeah, that's wild, Nick. Yeah, we haven't experimented with any dry ice. I just saw our buddy Eric from Humboldt Kind Farms this morning making a post online talking about he has had good experience recently with dry ice, helping to fresh freeze their depth that they're processing right now. And I told him I want to get him on here to talk about that a little bit, because I think that could be a tool that could help a lot of people.
Yep. Pretty simple. It's a cooler with like dry ice pellets, maybe even like a piece of plastic laid down on top of that, just so you have some type of separation. And I've seen people take whole colas and put them in there, kind of elevated, to kind of get them colder before they start bucking them down. But usually what people do is they'll buck their bags down, or they'll buck their material down into bags, and they'll put that bag directly in the ice chest with the dry ice. That flash freezes it, and then they'll go from there to the regular freezer. So you kind of, instead of that 4-hour mark, then you can potentially get it done in a half hour or two, and then just rinse and repeat, and then you have it pretty much frozen and ready to go for manufacturing.
Wow. And you could use that material just right away, huh?
Essentially, yeah. There's other people too that are experimenting with fresh, not frozen washing, where they're literally bucking down their plants an X amount of grams and they're washing it right away. I haven't experimented with it. I can see pluses and minuses to doing so. A minus being that the heads are still very vulnerable and very soft. So you could be rupturing heads simultaneously if you're trying to go into a wash with not fresh, or not frozen, but fresh material. But also, there could be positives and benefits to it as well. I just haven't done it myself.
Yeah, are they doing an iceless wash on that, or how do they even are they just doing their normal wash?
I think they're just doing normal washes. I think the particular gentleman I'm thinking of right now is your standard washer. He uses ice and water, hand washing. So I don't know. I would imagine if it's faceless, you have to have all the parameters really dialed in as far as temperatures of your water and temperatures of your environment as well.
I wonder if he's doing longer paddle times too, or if he has to beat that material up anymore to actually get it to yield, or like you're saying, if maybe you harvest it early morning or in cold temps and room's cold enough, water temp right, and loose neck strain, and it all lines up, maybe, huh?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, interesting, man. Really interesting. Well, Tamara was just dabbing on some of your rosin here. Actually, is what I was trying to show you. Some of this California from the homie Ricky here. And we really liked the melt, that Cran Mallow melt that you gave us at the Ridge Sesh was really impressive. Awesome. You did an awesome talk on your THCA process at the Ridge Sesh. That was very cool. You're going to be joining us in Oakland on August 16th. What are you going to have with you? What can we expect from coming from Rakems? What are you working on right now, and what kind of consistencies you got coming down the pipeline?
By that one, what's that? Pretty much 2 weeks away now. I'm definitely going to have our single stores from our last run, our indoor run, using Mills Organic line. We're going to have our Superproof. We're going to have our Peach Panther, maybe some blends. I've been doing some in-house blends of the rosin post-processing. So with like Superproof mixed with the Peach Panther. This little tropical vibe. Did an RS11 with the Peach Panther to give it a little bit of a gas sweetness. But on the chopping block, I have some Coup d'etat in there. I have some Champagne to wash, some melon balls from another local farmer up here in Grass Valley. So I have some genetics, hopefully flying line. I'll be swinging by with the freezer for me to process as well. So maybe I'll have some flying line stuff by then as well. Diamonds, solventless jam, probably some more melt. I don't release too much melt. Only time that melt usually comes out of the Rackham's line is if the hash is clean enough, it produces a good enough melt to match the rosin, if that makes sense. So I'm very particular on my melt and if it's quality enough. And it's also a mixed micron melt, usually. It's not just a single micron 9DU or 73U. It's usually kind of a broad spectrum for me to kind of get that entourage effect from the melt versus a single micron. So I just don't, in my opinion, in my heart, and no hate against anybody else doing it the other way, is I feel like the bigger the micron spectrum, the bigger the effects, the bigger the taste, the bigger the medicinal effects. All of that kind of allude to that reasoning of why I do what I do with my product.
Yeah, the bigger experience. I love that, dude. Absolutely, in so many ways. Yeah,
it's not to say that a straight 90U melt or rosin isn't good or unique in its own way, but in my opinion, the broader the spectrum or the closer you can get to that fuller spectrum without involving some of the microns that might give you more of that plantier, aroma, the better the outcome. Like you said, the better the effects, the better just the entourage of the whole experience.
Yeah. You've got a stacked menu you're bringing. Excuse me. Talk to me a little bit about combining rosin post-processing. That's really cool. The winner of our last month's Cured Cup qualifier, which we're going to be running again this month, was a really awesome, what we were all calling it the cinnamon roll. And he showed how he made it afterwards. He did an Instagram post. This was Eric from Humboldt Kind Farms up in Humboldt County. And it was a nice big slab of fresh press with a nice slab of cold cure on top of it. They rolled it all up and then cut it into these little pieces and turned them on their side and arranged it. And it, the presentation was on point, but the hash was amazing also. And as you dug into it, it was these two different consistencies and really fun, killer hash, man. And it was cool that he shared how to make it, because we were like, I'm going to take one of these home and unroll it and try to reverse engineer this bad boy, figure out how he did this. Tell us what you're doing, mixing rosin, and what that journey's been like for you.
It's been fun. It's been able to give me not only another SKU to put on the menu, but also kind of play around with terp profiles and also the elevation of the high. Because they're like in some instances when I've worked with product, I'll produce it and we'll have a finished product that's really bright white, really, and maybe really colorful, or not colorful, but really really flavorful. But yet the high is lackluster, and I correlate the color of resin as far as the oils, the finished oil, the rosin, to its harvest time. And when it was harvesting early doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But if you go too early, that can affect the production of your THCA, which would then in turn into THC when it's combustible, right? So if there's that lack of that THCA because you didn't give it enough chance to build up, then you might have a really beautiful looking rosin that tastes great, but then has a really short duration of elevation. So with that being said, sometimes I like to mix other rosins with that rosin to not only make a unique terp profile that's something unique to my brand, but also kind of help its potency as well. I get a lot of my rosin and my products tested, usually multiple times tested, just to make sure that it's on point when it comes to potency and also flavor. So that kind of gives me a little bit more data to go in with when I'm mixing different cultivars together, and also just kind of experimenting and playing around with profiles in themselves. I got something that's really funky, like a double D's or a GMO, for example, and you probably know as well as I do that usually anything that's mixed with GMO, it overpowers everything. Sometimes like a citrus or a lemon profile. So I'd like to mix other things in there and try to see how they complement each other with something that's kind of opposites, or even the same type of sweet tropical flavors, how you'd mix those together and create something totally different and unique. Like right now, my super booth prior to this run has always been really orange citrus, and now it's producing like a tangerine citrus, like a realistic tangerine citrus. Um, we haven't changed much in our nutrients or our medium, so I'm not sure why that's happening. It's kind of cool. But we also have the Peach Panther, which is very high in the papaya peach range. So I'm blending those two 50-50 and getting a really unique tropical vibe from that. Same thing was said with the RS11 in the Super Booth. I did kind of like a 60-40, and I usually just start with like a gram. I'll mix certain percentages. I'll do zero point 0.6 of one and 0.4 of another, or 0.3, 0.7, depending on which one is more aggressive of a profile, and just see how it plays out. And then if I like what I see and I like how I feel from the effects of that R&D and that test, I'll make a larger batch of it. But I always like to do it in the rosin stage versus mixing the hash or even mixing the flour in the wash, because that gives you the opportunity and gives you more ammo at your fingertips to be able to play around with the not only consistencies, but how the rosin reacts with the other rosin, but also the ratios. If you go and put 50% and 50% of two different cultivars in the wash, you're just going to get what you're going to get. And you have no way to control that. I know some people will tend to do that with smaller washes because they don't want to do a bunch of back-to-back-to-back washes, so they'll just mix them all together, which could be cool, and I've done that myself. But if you take the initiative and you have the patience, those small batches and break all that stuff down, even by microns, where you have all 8 bags or all 6 bags, just more than your standard average rosin washing bags. That gives you more opportunities to play around and make your end product represent your brand the way that you choose and see fit. That's kind of why I like to do it the way that I do it. I know like Gold Country Resin up here, they have so many different lines of flavors and so many different products, and they do the same type of blending as well, post processing, and it's pretty cool. It's just it's fun. It's nice to be able to create unique stuff that not too many other people have, if at all. Playing with the cultivars on the back end, rather than trying. It's almost like a breeder taking 2 different genetics and then putting those 2 together to try to get something on the back end. I'm doing the same thing with that on the rosin on the back end. Just not having to deal with popping seeds or pheno hunting or dealing with pollen or anything like that. Kind of let them deal with that, and I do it my own way on the back end. But it's pretty cool and fun. Sure.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I was definitely that guy this winter that had to do a couple mixed washes because I've got super small batches and I can only, same thing, can only spend so much time doing it. And yeah, it's hit or miss, man. You really don't know what you're getting, especially, you know, I'm doing seed strains. I did one where it was 3 similar, you know, Chili Verde crosses, and one really dominated the mix. It was great. But to me, I could really tell which one really stood out. You know, the Biscotti cross was really dominating the whole soup. But yeah, really interesting, man. I haven't been able to experiment with any post processing mixing. Are you mixing different consistencies together, or do you start out with the same consistency just to get a base idea and then go there?
I don't really pay too much attention to the consistency initially, but I do take it into consideration eventually because, well, as we both know, sometimes a resin will produce a drier resin than the next cultivar, or even if you're doing a pheno hunt, you might have, you know, different phenos of the same genetics producing a different type of consistency on the back end. Something that's a little bit more drier might need a little bit more work to kind of get it more malleable. I know as much as people don't want to hear this, but heat can be your friend to a certain extent when post processing to make things easier, not only on your wrist, but for just handling the product in itself. Not extreme heats, but just, you know, getting it a little bit more warmer. You know, once we were on the press, which I have right here, you know, once you're on the press, you're pressing at around 180 degrees, 160 to 200 sometimes. All of those volatile terpenes, they're gone. They're off gassing. They're sayonara. They're expelled. But those are going to be the most volatile and monoterpenes that we're not going to want to consume and ingest anyways. So if you take that into consideration, post processing, when you're having to deal with mixing consistencies or turning a cold cure into a batter or things of that nature, it'll help you if you have a little bit of heat, or even if your environment is slightly warmer than you normally have it as a cold room. It'll help mitigate things a little bit easier and just help you kind of control what you got going on. Now, if you're dealing with something that just literally turns into a cream or super soft rosin, then you don't have to focus on that one as much. But when you start mixing the two together, I usually like to try and involve a creamier rosin with a drier rosin because I know the middle ground is going to be something that's kind of cohesive and more malleable, like a soft butter, if you will. That's kind of the consistency I'm always looking for. I'd rather it be that. That's just my cup of tea. You know, that's just what I prefer. Doesn't mean my clients prefer that or other people. It's everybody has their own thing. But I know that I'm looking for this specific consistency, and if I mix these two different ones together, I'll end up with that. If I mix a creamy with a creamy, that could just end you up with something that's really soupy and gooey. I personally don't like rosin when it's that soupy, so to speak, because I know for a fact that there's going to be higher levels of terpene content in there, which isn't always a good thing. Having those teen percentage of numbers like 10 to 12 to 13% terpene profiles in products that you're dabbing can be corrosive to your esophagus and your throat. If people ever wonder why their throat's stinging, maybe look at the product that you're dabbing. If there's a higher amount of terpene content in there, that's probably going to be one of the reasons. I mean, obviously, you can ingest products that aren't as terpene and still get that flavor hit, and it still be quality and get what you're after. But there's a certain point there's a certain line that you cross when it comes to terpene content that exposes itself in a wetness of your rosin or even your melt, for that matter, if it melts and greases up. That isn't really that beneficial to our health. But a lot of people don't really talk about it a lot because it's frowned upon. And it's like, what do you mean less terpenes is better? It's like, well, there's give and takes to that, you know. There's different amounts of the individual terpenes play a part in that as well. There's some terpenes that hang around longer that are more caustic, that pronounce themselves a lot more, and there's some that are on the background that you don't even know exist until you have a lab test results in front of you. So it's cool. It's science, and I'm learning all this science as I go. It's been very interesting for the last 8 years, to say the least.
Well, I remember that really goes back to the early BHO days, man, and these really soupy, terpene-rich BHOs that we used to see that they wouldn't even get you that high, but it would burn the shit out of your throat. And those early BHO vape pens that were just all terps, and people were using crazy cutting agents, back then. I'm sure they still are in a lot of markets, but yeah, we all had to get a good lesson in those terpenes. It's a solvent, and what can heavy doses of that be doing to your lungs? And yeah, none of us know the long-term effects of any of this yet. We are the test monkeys in this experiment, and some of.
I mean, you think about it this way: you have essential oils, right? Like doTERRA and companies like that. Now, some of those you can ingest. You can put like a drop or two in some water or on your tongue, right? But you're not sitting there put a whole dropper or a whole bottle into your system, because you'd hurt yourself. The same concept can go for cannabis as well. Like there's a certain, like I said before, a tipping point or level to. Now, what that is, the percentage, I'm not sure, because I'm not a scientist and I'm not a chemist, but I know there's something that correlates there, equaling that. Now, obviously, if you get a sting in your throat from a dab or smoking flower, there's other variables that can be played at that when it comes to flushing or sprays that might have been involved during harvest or during flowering. But you're never going to know that for sure unless you're the actual farmer. So without testing, without data, without the information in front of you, you truly don't know what you're ingesting unless you actually know the people who are growing it, and if that's not yourself.
Yeah, once again, it's always important to know your farmer or be able to grow your own, make your own medicine. Definitely crucial. Well, Nick, you've been awesome, man. Giving me so much of your time today, dude. You give me a lot of food for thought. Got my mind spinning in a bunch of different directions, and I'm so glad you're going to be joining us on August 16th, the Friday before the Emerald Cup in Oakland, for the next Regen Sesh, man. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, it's going to be it's tight cut. It's cutting it tight because that next week I'm prepping to go to Burning Man. So usually we take this whole month off because we have to prep for 2 weeks to be out there, but we're only going out there for 5 days, so there's not too much prep. But I'm stoked to come out. It's the first time coming out to the church. I'll be able to meet everybody that's responsible for throwing this event, including you, and check it out for my first time. I can't wait.
Yeah, awesome, brother. Well, we're stoked to have you, and yeah, thanks for joining us today, man, on the hottest part of the day. I hope you stay cool out there, and yeah, I'll catch you soon, brother. We'll do this again soon.
All right, guys. Cheers. Thank you.
All right, take care.